Welcome, Josh, to Timely Conversations. Thank you for your time.
Glad to be here.
And should we dive deep straight away, or should we?
Up to you. It's your show.
Let's talk about your passion in directing.
Oh, sure.
Like how that come about.
I would say more broadly, my passion is storytelling. I've always been interested in storytelling, growing up writing stories when I was a kid, journaling, drawing comic books, or illustrating comic books, just like trying to tell stories. I've always been doing that. I've always had a creative brain, I suppose, creative mind. But yeah, I'd say overall my passion is storytelling. I like telling stories. When I discovered, filmmaking, again when I was a kid, I realized films are the best way to tell stories. Visual storytelling is the best way to get your message across, get your themes across. It's a very beautiful way to tell stories.
I got to see you direct on Love Thy Neighbor.
Yeah.
I'm so privileged to be doing the behind the scenes for that alongside somebody else as well. I got to see how he did the behind the scenes and how we collaborate and how we cover, some of the angles we want to cover.
Yeah.
And just the sheer volume of staff needed.
Yeah.
From the cinematographer to your second in charge.
Sure.
Yeah, your production design person and your whole cast. There's not one part of it that I would say is easy to be liaising with or to be communicating to. So, directing such a multifaceted role that involves guiding, right, a production from inception to completion.
Yeah.
So, your vision and concept, how do you come up with your vision to begin with for a film?
Well, I mean, everything that I've directed is something that I also wrote, so it definitely started there. For Love Thy Neighbor specifically, it all got spurred on from a monologue that I wrote. It had no detail to it. It had no character to it. It was just a feeling, a mood. And this monologue was about a guy who was trapped somewhere. He was stuck in a place, and he had no one to talk to except the person sitting next to them. And he in this monologue, he has a moment of defiance where he literally leaps out of his seat and says, "I can't do this anymore. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to find happiness." And I realized very quickly, I have to tell a story about this. I have to frame a story around this. So I quickly came up with the idea that, okay, this guy is a priest, and he's stuck in this confession booth. He doesn't like his job, and he's trying to get out of it. I tried to find a comedy angle to it as well, because I think, comedy is a great way to, talk about very serious themes and heavy themes. Levity is very important when just dealing with tragedy, I think.
Yeah. I certainly saw the struggles each character had, right, through dialogue. I think it was cleverly done. Now, when it comes to, interpreting the script and visualizing the final product and establishing the overall tone and style, you mentioned it came from just a monologue, right, in your head, and then it played out from then on, right? So in terms of script analysis, understanding the script is a start, right? It's quite crucial. And this includes, analysing the characters, themes and plot, structure to make informed decisions about how to bring the story to life.
Sure.
Do you give preference to what you may start off with? Do you think it's character, themes or plot structure being foremost of something that you consider first?
I don't think there's a right answer to it, because I've started with different things for different projects. For this one, I think it was again, because it started with this kernel of an idea, I was like, okay, well, I guess my first question is, who is this guy who's stuck? And how can I find the comedy in that? So I fleshed out his character. I gave him sort of a position. I gave him a contrast, because I think humor comes from contrast. So he's a priest, but he's also an atheist, and that doesn't really make sense in many other contexts, but it works here, and it makes sense why he feels trapped. So character definitely came first on Love Thy Neighbor, definitely. Then everything else sort of just fell into place.
Yeah. So you reckon it changes depending on the type of production?
Sure. Yeah.
Casting. I mean, do you prefer to choose your actors, or you leave it to like a casting director?
I've never worked with a casting director. I've always, every project I've done, I've either produced it, wrote it, and or directed it. So it's always fell onto me to kind of find the people I'm looking for. So that I've always left that process to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's a very crucial part because, you know, selecting performers who can best embody a character probably is something that you need to give a lot of thought on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you could consult people, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think directors have the final decision making in terms of that. Rehearsals, you mentioned off camera that lately you did a rehearsal.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Let's talk about for what project?
So that's for my upcoming project production, which is a comedy pilot that I'm trying to develop into something further once we finish shooting. So just doing the first episode for now. Recently, I did a rehearsal with the three main cast, playing the three main characters, and we just went to a park, quite similar to this, in the city, and we just sort of ran through the whole script, each scene, and basically what I was looking for is, do they play off each other well, comedically? Are they, do they have chemistry? And that is probably the most important thing you want out of a rehearsal, especially a first rehearsal is, am I finding the chemistry? Is this going to look good on screen? Is it going to feel like these characters play off each other really well? And I definitely found all of that when I rehearsed.
Sometimes it's premeditated, you know, planning, and then sometimes a bit of luck, huh? You kind of have to be at the right place, the right time to find all these people.
Sure.
In the one hit.
Yeah.
So how do you find guiding actors through rehearsals? You know, that involves shaping their performances.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a moment where it's hard to depict your concept to the actor, like the actor's just not nailing it to how you want it? What is your approach if that happens?
Yeah, that can happen. And I try and, because I know going into this project, I know exactly what I'm looking for. I know what the tone should be. I know how they should I know how they should walk. I know how they should talk. I'm sort of like I was kind of like a god in that sense, where I know exactly what I'm trying to shape. You know, I'm trying to shape these people into a mold that I like, to be very pretentious about it. But essentially, I know what I'm looking for, and it can be difficult when an actor's not getting it at first, but I just give them as many tries until it clicks, and I'm like, okay, you've got it. And yeah, that is quite a process, I think. Yeah.
No doubt. I've seen it, for example, on YouTube, how films are made. You know, the making of, and they're a joy to see. There's no doubt. Ideas coming, formulating on set, and changes that directors make.
You just have to be articulate. I think you just have to be really articulate to your cast and your crew in order to get across your vision. And that's probably the most important thing, communication, because if you don't have that, then no one knows what you want, and everyone's just going to trip over themselves until they give their best guesstimate as to what you want, and you'll see that on screen. It's not what you want at all. You'll see that in the editing bay. That's not at all what you wanted.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned communication, because that leads to my next question.
Sure.
If, for example, actors give you another idea, and then you have producers that could give you another idea. How do you make that balance, and also having your own vision?
Yeah.
Is it? Can you strike that balance? Can you try to give variations, like shoot a scene just like how the actor wants to act it out,
Sure.
and then shoot a separate one on the same take, because the script says it's slightly different? How do you go about variations?
Well, even though I do know what I want, I think it's equally important to be open-minded. If you're coming into a project and you know what you want, that's great, but everyone's got their own ideas too, and you should be open to that, because maybe what they suggest is much better than what you had in mind ultimately, and that's perfectly okay. So I suppose when you're working with a producer, and I can't speak to this because I've always produced my own projects that I've directed, aside from one in uni, but for the most part, it's just making sure that you're keeping in line with what you've set out to do with your budget, and making sure that you're not sort of overstepping that, or else it's going to cause a lot of problems down the track. I feel like the best place to nip all these issues in the bud is during pre-production, before you've even gotten onto set. You have extensive meetings with your entire cast and crew and make sure everyone is, again, on the same page.
In terms of formal studying, do you think it's important to go through a uni degree if you want to become a filmmaker?
No, I don't think so at all. As someone who has a bachelor in creative arts, I don't think it's necessary, frankly. But what uni did give me is a network of people that I still work with. Friends of mine who are in the industry in different places now, but being able to work with them has been great. And I think gaining that network has been probably the most beneficial thing. Being able to be with like-minded creatives and being able to work with people, getting ideas off the ground. Because before that, I only had myself to bounce ideas off of, and until I got to uni and worked with like-minded people, that's been great to have that.
What do you think are the subjects that most helped you directing a film in creative arts?
In my creative arts course, definitely the directing class. I had a really great lecturer named Mark Gracie. He's a film director. He's done a bunch of Aussie comedies from the early 2000s and things like that. He was very instrumental. He showed me a bunch of different aspects of directing I never even knew about, especially comedy directing. And he was instrumental in me finding sort of my voice in that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Have you directed anything that's comedy related? I mean, I know Love Thy Neighbor definitely has sarcasm.
Sarcasm. It's very sarcastic.
If Karen had a miserable old bitch for a mother-in-law, it would be Mrs. Magdalene. I don't know how to tell you this, Mrs. Magdalene, but not only is throwing food scraps in the recycling not a sin in the eyes of the Lord, you didn't even do it. Why are you confessing?
Forgive me, Father, but that woman is not to be trusted.
That's conjecture. Whatever happened to Love Thy Neighbor?
She ought to be kicked out of the church council.
And that's not how this works.
Not how what works?
The confessional isn't designed for snitching.
I understand that, Father.
I don't think that you do.
That's conjecture.
Agree to disagree. Do you not have anything else to be doing right now?
No, I don't.
Sarcasm.
Sarcasm. It's very sarcastic, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite sarcastic.
It's a dark comedy. So it's not, on the surface, it's very bleak. It's not very, it seems like a very serious movie. That was what I was going for. But underneath that, there's a layer of comedy that's very understated and very not taken to the surface. And you see that. So you're definitely right. It doesn't come across like a comedy at first. But when you see the final product coming out in like a month or so, you'll see that for sure.
I definitely think that each character portray themselves quite well.
Sure.
Right. And did they have to roll off the script exactly? Did the actors can improvise on the spot? Did you give them a bit of freedom there?
I gave them a bit of freedom, but what they actually did stick to the book as close as very closely, which because I guess with this in hindsight, there wasn't a lot of room for improv. Everything sort of had to be timed exactly the way it was for the scenes to play out the way they did. So there wasn't really a whole lot of improvising, at least in hindsight. But normally, I'm very open to that when the opportunity presents itself. The lead actor in that, Odysseus, he was very good at sort of asking me where his head was at, where the character's head was at, and I feel like that very much informed his performance. And I don't think he wanted to take it off script too much, because he wanted to sort of stay in that place.
Yeah, I guess staying as close as you can to the director's vision.
Yeah.
Is a starting point.
Sure.
You definitely have to attempt that, right? Until the director makes a decision, maybe on set, that maybe you could have a spin to this, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a good approach.
Yeah.
as actors, to stick to what the directors are trying to portray in the first storyline, the original. Have you ever had moments where, you know, the departments such as cinematography, production, costume and sound all gave you something to think about, or difficult challenges, obstacles in these areas at the same time?
Sure.
Or is it like one after another? Like,
well, I mean, oftentimes challenges do come up. Like the lighting setup wasn't working quite the way we thought it would, so we had to adjust. Or I guess a good example is again on Love Thy Neighbor, when we were trying to get the timing right for the bit where the lights go red, and we were trying to do something there with the character trying to open a brochure and read it, but the timing was off or something, and we just couldn't quite get it. So we found an alternative to it, and stuff like that definitely happens all the time. You just find a way around it, and that's all you can do.
yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Can I understand blocking in filmmaking or directing, as in referring to staging of actors and and the movement within the space? So, you know, would you say it's important for creating visual interest and ensuring that the action flows smoothly? So how do you set the actors up within certain space?
Well, going back to Love Thy Neighbor, the space was very constricted. So there wasn't a lot of blocking to do necessarily. It was about, okay, when does this next character go into the space and interrupt the priest character and come in and out. I kind of liken the blocking to Love Thy Neighbor to putting on a stage play. It was very theatrical in that sense. Characters almost came in from stage left and came out stage right or whatever. And it was just limited to the space. Everything around it was black. It was just this one set. And I likened it to a stage play, and I thought that was a really cool thing. With my tomorrow, I'm actually doing blocking rehearsals for my next thing, the production, and that's a bit more involved because we are trying to do something very much like The Office, which is following these characters around with like an invisible camera crew around like a house or a park or what have you, and that's going to take a lot of figuring out the setup because. Cameras can't really cross over each other because we're doing like a 2-camera setup. Lighting has to be like lit across the entire location, or else it's gonna look dim in certain spots throughout the blocking.
Yep. I went to a Panasonic event where they talked about lighting, camera angles. So like what you're saying, the 3-point.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from that session.
Sure.
Do you consult people that are in the film industry when you produce and shoot a film, or do you purely just do research leading up to it?
Just do research. Aside from the network of people I know from uni and from film groups and things like that, I don't really have like a contact in the industry itself. So I tend to do a lot of research, depending on what it is.
We briefly touched on challenges and obstacles that arise during production. How do you overcome those obstacles?
Through sheer will and brute force. No. Just talking it out. If it's with a specific department, we'll talk one-on-one with them, with me and the first assistant director, and just sort of figure out, okay, what's the problem and how quickly can we resolve it? Because time is of the essence. Nowhere is the phrase time is money more applicable than in the film industry because, well, if we have to shoot an extra day, that's more money in the budget that we have to pay people to be there, transport costs, what have you. And that's just not on. So we just have to quickly and effectively figure out any issues that arise.
Tell me a time when you had to quickly decide on something to change, or it felt it would enhance, a scene, because time is of the essence.
Back in uni, where we had like an actor pull out in like the last possible second, so we had to quickly like scramble to okay, we're gonna have to change the script and have another character that was already in the project step up and, you know, enhance their role a bit more, and that almost killed the shoot, but we got this guy to step up and do those additional scenes, and it saved our bacon.
Yeah, like a second actor.
Yeah.
A standby actor.
This actor was playing a different character. He was playing a character in the movie already. We just beefed up his role more to supplement what we lost, basically.
Yeah. So you have to make adaptations to the script slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah. To write a little bit more for the existing character that he was portraying.
Yeah.
So, is there a procedure for feedback and adaptations? Because you were saying you keep an open mind before. So you're very willing to adapt to refining performances and improving the overall production, yeah?
Yeah.
So what is your process of adaptation for when it comes to making films?
From what stage?
Or do you prefer to just have one take, like this is the script, that's it? And you know, if it goes to someone to gain feedback, do you think it's likely that you change the script?
It's very likely. In fact, I will almost always do, because usually they've suggested something that I think is much better than what I had in mind, or enhances what I had in mind, rather. And I think adapting to changes is again a core tenet to being a really good filmmaker, I think. Because if you can't be willing to change things on the fly, then you need to work in a different industry. You need to find a new passion, because this isn't going to work out.
Would you say that you like to stick to your guns, they say, right? Or do you think you want to feed the audience what they want to see? What type of director do you fall?
I almost never think of audience. I always think of myself, like, what do I want to watch? And so I feel like that just makes for a better vision when you have something to say about the world, or about society, or about you know, people.
Yeah.
You know, you have a theme that you've been itching to talk about. That comes first and foremost, and talk about audience to the producer or whoever's going to figure that stuff out.
Yeah. No, it's good that you have core beliefs. You know, like what you're saying, you have a message to send to people, and you churn out what you're proud of. I think it's a really great way to start. Or else try serving such a mass audience. You're not going to please everybody.
Exactly.
So I think it's good to have strong will about what you want to carry.
Yeah. I feel like one theme that comes across in a lot of my writing is greed and avarice, and you know, people not willing to not be greedy, and I feel like that comes across in a lot of my work. The priest in Love Thy Neighbor is very self-serving, and kind of tries to manipulate the situation for himself.
Idiot.
How much did he offer you for your messianic protection? I'll double it.
Asshole.
Hey! Now, some say that a man's reputation is his gospel. It's the whole reason why you're here in the first place. I've got friends in much higher places than you.
Doesn't work out for him, well, I guess you'll find out, but, you know, ultimately it shouldn't, because people like that shouldn't get ahead, and that's what that's one of my strong beliefs when I'm writing. That's kind of it's weird that some themes come up very often, almost subconsciously, because I guess it's something you hold very dear to you.
Yeah. It's always these concepts that you wanted to explore, as a filmmaker, and then it's like a catalyst to be starting, a script, and then you visualize how you're going to make it and turn it into reality. Yeah. Is there any directors that you admire?
He's not a director, but one of my favorite filmmakers of all time is Charlie Kaufman. He's a brilliant writer. He deals with metafiction, which is and one of his films, Adaptation, is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's about a screenwriter named Charlie Kaufman. So he wrote about himself effectively, trying to adapt a novel, and that became a very difficult process for him. That was the backstory behind this film, was he was trying to adapt the novel in real life, and he wasn't able to do it. So he just basically wrote the way he got around it was just writing this movie about his own experience trying to write the movie, essentially. And I thought that was so informative of like, okay, so that's what a film can be. You can like tell stories about film and filmmaking and be meta. And in a similar vein, Dan Harmon, who's a comedy writer, and he wrote like the show Community, for example, and that's a very meta show that kind of plays into tropes, sitcom tropes and comedy tropes a lot. And that he was also a very big influence on me as well.
Is there any upcoming topics you want to explore further? I mean, you mentioned about greed as a starting point for Love Thy Neighbor. Any other topics? Like, for example, lust maybe, or love. Love is often explored. Love in relationships or romance. Is there any topics?
I think another central theme of that I tend to like to explore is the fallacy of greed is one of them. Corporatization is another one. So like corporatization of media and stuff like that, which I've sort of been thinking about a lot lately. It's become a big issue. I feel like filmmakers don't have much of a voice anymore. Mass market appeal is far more important. So I've been dwelling on that a lot lately, and I'm trying to find the best place to do that, tell that story. So that's a big one, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take on this. You know, like, for example, we've got this rise of like influencers and YouTubers and, you know, media from just a person.
Yeah.
And then to like news, the more, let's talk about, let's say the channels, channel 7, 9, 10.
Yeah.
They're a bit more formalized.
Sure.
Now the audience is, I guess, so varied between the two. And then you mentioned before that you started making things from an idea yourself first. You don't think about appealing to everybody. Do you think if, for example, somebody comes to you with a script and the producer says, could you please, I really like your way of directing, could you please make this? And then it doesn't align with what you want to do, your goals, and you feel like it does try to, what you were saying about mass marketing appealing to that kind of thing. How would you approach that? Would you attempt to make the movie? Because somebody said, hey, I really want you to do this because I really believe in you.
Well, I would, if they believe in me, then in this hypothetical situation, I would find a way to make it work. I'll find a way to incorporate my ideas on top of that. So as a director, if you're a director and it's not a script you've written, you're trying to adapt that. You're trying to put your own spin on it. It might be something that the writer didn't even think of. And I'd say that's perfectly acceptable and valid because you're ultimately the one putting this on the screen, not them, not the producer, not the writer. It's you. So you have to adapt. You have to find a way to make it work for yourself, even if it's something you don't necessarily believe in. Find a way to believe in it. Find a way to see it through.
You know, we were saying that, projects, often come with tight schedules, right?
Yeah, sure.
And then you have to make quick decisions as a director, while still ensuring high quality work. So how do you balance time management with creativity?
It's a very delicate balancing act, I think. And I'm dealing with that at the moment, prepping for the production. We're shooting next weekend, and there's some logistical hurdles that we need to sort of overcome. And but I've been sort of just trying to be laser focused on prepping myself as a director and knowing what I want to achieve when I get on set. So it's about sort of feel like you also have to be able to delegate if you're in a sort of above the line position on a project like that. And if you're doing everything yourself, then you're going to have no time to figure out the creative stuff. So you have to have your producing partner or whatever pick up the slack and do things on their end to make sure you have the room necessary to achieve what you want to achieve.
Now, you mentioned about budget constraints, right? Which almost forces you to find innovative solutions and compromise. Do you try to compromise first or find innovative solutions?
Innovate first, and if you can't do that, then compromise. Compromise should be a last resort in every circumstance. Because you don't want to compromise on your vision in a best case scenario, but sometimes you have to. But if you can innovate or improve on what you've got, if the light's not working, but you found a different way to do the scene where if it's the more dimly lit it is, the more thematic it is, or potent it is, rather, it's more adherent to your vision, then that's an accidental innovation that you've got, and that's great. That's great news. You've figured it out. But if you have to compromise, then say, again, like my actor dropping out, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll change the script now. I will ask our secondary actor if they can pick up the slack. And that was a compromise that worked, but it's something I did not want to do at first. It was that was a very precarious situation, but we ended up having to compromise.
And maintaining focus, like, as a director, would you say that you have to keep, overall narrative and tone consistent throughout the project?
Yeah.
So, this means staying focused on the bigger picture, but while also addressing the myriad details involved in production.
Yeah.
Would you say that you're very much focused on details of each scene?
I am focused. As a writer, I'm focused on the bigger picture, but as a director, I'm very focused on attention to detail, because you're on the set and you're working very closely with the actors. You have you might have insight you have now that you didn't have as a writer, so you're looking for those little details that you might not have picked up when you were broadly outlining this story. So I'd say, when I'm a director, I am definitely more focused on attention to detail.
How do you handle pressure if there's overwhelming amounts of details that you have to focus on? Would you say that stress comes about?
It can, yeah, definitely. But if you have a good amount if you have some good people around you who are very good at their job, you don't have to you only have to worry about what you set out to do on the day.
Balancing creativity and practicality. Now, this kind of draws back onto the budget thing where, the most imaginative ideas are not feasible due to budget. Have you ever come across that situation?
Yes,
where
I
you
did.
had this brilliant idea but just can't execute?
Yes, I did.
Without enormous budget.
Yes, I did. It was a film called Love Thy Neighbor. It was, I didn't know where I was going to shoot that for the longest time. I was like, am I going to get a church for this? Like, well, I can't do that because the confession box is actually quite tiny and you can't really fit a camera and your lights on it, so what am I going to do about that? Well, I happened across a cabinet in my garage and I spray painted it black. I cut out holes on it with the help of my carpenter of an uncle, and we managed to build the set ourselves. And I was like, okay, well, we're just going to do it in my garage now. And it managed to work out very well for me.
It's so clever because I got to see that you had enough angles there to clearly show that it's a confession box.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like what you're saying, it absolutely fitted the camera angle.
Yeah.
So I thought it was super clever. Let's talk about audience reception, yeah.
Sure.
So now, while a director can control many aspects of a production, they can't fully predict how the audience will respond. So managing expectations and coping with criticism can be a significant challenge.
Sure.
But you come off from the angle of, you know what, this is my idea, I'm just going to shoot this, regardless of what people say.
Yeah.
Is there ever a point where you doubted yourself? Like, is there any point where there's self-doubt.
If you're not self-doubting yourself, then you're not a filmmaker. That's a very persistent part of the process, is self-doubt and not being sure if what you're doing is even worth it. And that's very natural when you're creative, because you're very insulated. You're very in your own head all the time. You're not really sure if anyone's going to like what you're doing, but you have to persist, and you have to be like, well, I like what I'm doing. I feel very strongly about this. Someone out there is probably going to like it too. And that's just my mentality.
Is there a trailer for Love Thy Neighbor that we can attach to Timely Conversations?
Not yet. No, I would say that, no.
Maybe I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Oh, but there's behind the scenes.
There's behind the scenes
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
We could release that, right?
Yeah.
Onto Timely Conversations. I don't see why not.
I don't see
Obviously,
why
I'll let you know.
Yeah, you let me know what snippets
yeah.
you want.
What snippets, I think.
Yeah.
We've covered quite a lot already. We talked about, let's talk about the questions. Now, studying we talked about already, your time there. Is there any other career paths that you would have wanted to do if it's not filmmaking?
If I didn't do filmmaking and I wasn't interested in film or media studies in high school, I was probably going to do psychology, because psychology happened to be my best overall subject. And I did enjoy that. It's probably my favorite science, actually, the science of the brain. That stuff still comes up in my work, though. I do find myself, like when thinking about characters and their traits, what makes them tick, I sometimes go back to my psych studies inherently, because that stuff just comes up a lot more than I thought. So I'm very fascinated by psychology, and I think that to this day still persists in my work. And if I didn't do media, I probably would have gone for a psych degree at some point.
That's cool. If you're ever stuck in filmmaking, do you have any mentors that you can speak to?
I have a lot of friends that I can talk to when I'm stuck, definitely. My peers, my closest friends from uni, writing partners. Again, like the fact that I even have this network at all has been a very good sort of fallback when I feel like I'm not quite getting what I want. I can always ask people to read my work for feedback, or I can. Those connections have been very vital.
How do you actually start writing? Do you have, like, for example, moments where you have to lock yourself up in a room and that's it? You don't see friends, you can't socialize, you have to just nut it out? Or do you sort of like take a pen and notepad with you, and everywhere you go, you're making notes? How do you creatively write?
Well, it starts with the notes. Again, the monologue I came up with was something I came up with when I was out and about. I wrote that in my notes app. I have my notes app makes up half my storage space on my phone, because it's just chock full of ideas, stuff that have been realized or haven't been realized. So it starts with that, like the ideation process, coming up with some kernel of an idea. And then, if I feel very strongly about it, I will sit in my room for a few hours and just figure it out until I can't figure it out anymore, or writer's block hits me and I literally can't write anymore.
Is there any go-to sitcoms that you see to be inspired to start writing?
Definitely.
Because you mentioned The Office, and Episodes was
Yeah.
a starting point for the production.
Yeah,
that
that's right.
You're writing about.
Definitely, the style and tone wise, yeah, those are instrumental. Because one episode is a sort of parody of the industry, Hollywood and things like that, and The Office stylistically is what we're trying to achieve with like this camera crew following these people around. Other sitcoms I love. I mean, I grew up with The Simpsons, and that was I've always considered that to be a very clever show, especially back in its heyday, the way it dealt with comedy and things like that. Arrested Development is another favorite. That is also stylistically a lot like what we're trying to achieve, because again, it feels like very handheld camera people following these people around, and again, a very clever comedy. So I love clever comedies that make you think. British humour, especially a lot of British humour, for sure, is instrumental to my writing style.
What about resources? Is there any books, websites that you visit to help you create content, create filmmaking, and coming up with scripts?
I mean, one of the ones off the top of my head that I constantly go to is a website called tvtropes.org, and what that website is essentially is a database of like different film and TV tropes of character tropes, like, or different archetypes, like for example, like in the Western genre, you have like you know, the no nonsense sheriff, or the sort of the serious cowboy who rolls into town and knows no one. There are things like that website sort of has descriptions for all these different tropes. So inherently, when you're writing and coming up with a character, you sort of have an idea of what kind of character they are. A website like this is very good at helping sort of put a label on it and put a description to it. It's like, okay, so this is what I'm going for. I'm going for this sort of genre stereotype, or this character stereotype. So that website, I tend to help me in the character creation process.
That's good. Any advice you'd like to give to people that like to get into filmmaking?
Wow, that's a big question. Like, I suppose I would tell them to just start. If there's nothing stopping you, then just do it. You don't need to. This is kind of a cliche at this point, but you don't even need like a film degree to make films. You don't need a good camera to make films. You know, you've got an iPhone. You can do whatever you want. Just be sure to have a very good sense of what you want. If you see the world in a particular way, make sure to write that down, because you never know. There might be an idea there waiting somewhere.
I like that. On that note, I want to thank you for your time.
Oh, sure.
Before we wrap up, hang on. I just want you to talk about a bit more. Let's elaborate on the production.
Oh, sure.
I mean, you briefly talked about it.
Yeah.
But let's get the audience excited. Let's talk about episode 2, because you mentioned you talked about episode 1.
Yeah.
How does it work? Like, have you written each script for each episode?
Well,
How many episodes all up for the production?
we're looking at about like 8 episodes. We have titles for them. We have short descriptions for them, and that's about it. We kind of know vaguely where the next couple of episodes are going, but we are very hyper-focused on just making sure the first episode is as good as it can possibly be.
Is there anything else that you reckon we should promote or let the audience know?
I don't know. I'm not much for self-promotion.
No. I've gathered that.
Yeah.
You're quite humble about everything. So low key. I've had guests that can elaborate
Yeah.
quite a lot.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's also guests that are very succinct. So this is not like the first time I've come across someone that's so super fast at answering each question.
I suppose coming up, if people want to follow my film page, Petrelli Pictures, Petrelli _pictures, and things like that.
Let's throw that in.
Yeah, and the production web series on Instagram as well.
Yeah, perfect.
And that's pretty much coming up.
Yeah, cool. And Josh, I've noticed that you have an Instagram page directed for films.
Yeah.
The name is Petrelli Films.
Petrelli _pictures. Yeah.
Pictures, cool.
That's my film page.
Yep, so we'll throw in that link. Petrelli
Petrelli _pictures on
Underscore
Instagram.
pictures on
and
Instagram.
the production web series on Instagram.
Thank you for tuning in.